it's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for this morning's discussion, and that is David Kirkpatrick from Fortune magazine, who's an extraordinary journalist on all things information technology, and who has lived in Africa, and who has just an extraordinary way about him in terms of moderating and pulling out these discussions. I've had the honor of being moderated by David, so I know we're in for a real treat.
Well, let me start by saying you all are really in for a treat, I have to say. Having talked to this amazing group, I can tell you we're going to have a really interesting time here. And I also would like to say it's really a privilege for me and for Fortune to be involved in such an extraordinary event. This is actually the kind of thing that should happen a lot more, particularly pertaining to Africa, and doesn't, especially in the United States. Africa in the United States is kind of the forgotten continent, it often seems. So let me just quickly introduce them all to you. And I'm going to have to use a cheat sheet because there's a lot of information here. So we'll start out with, and if I mispronounce any names, I apologize in advance. I did live in Africa, but it was 40 years ago, so it does hardly count. Little pronunciation help, though, from that. So Oriokola, who is from Kenya, she is probably, she's been living in the United States for a long time, just recently moved back to Kenya. She got a degree from Harvard Law School. That's sort of uncharacteristic of this group, I think, to be so Americanized in the education department. She's also got a blog and is really getting involved quickly in her country, both from a human rights point of view. She's getting involved in work on that in Nairobi, and she's also doing some business work there. Next, Eric Osiakwan. I did it? Okay. He's Ghanaian. He's also a blogger, and he is a IT consultant, or as they say in Africa, ICT, Information and Communications Technology. That's sort of the UN way of putting what we always call IT, and a journalist. So, and then we have Kadiatou Diédiou. Did I get that? Kadiatou is the only member of this panel who is currently in the government in her country, which is Senegal. She's a member of parliament, and she's the youngest member of parliament. And she told me there are 25 women out of 125 members of parliament? 120. Right, 120, yeah, which is a big change. And so she represents something very new in her country, although Senegal has moved further in governance than a lot of countries. They still have a long way to go in development, though. So then we have Emeka Okafor, who I had a good chance to talk to last night, who's Nigerian. So since I lived in Nigeria, I have a little particular feeling for the Nigerians here. He's very opinionated, you'll find. He's also a blogger, so he's expressing that in the world already. And he's a consultant currently living in the United States, in Brooklyn. But he does plan eventually to go back to Nigeria, and he was telling me that there's a lot of people moving back to Nigeria these days, which is probably something we need to discuss. So, Eleni Gebramariam? It's not good. That was the one I didn't practice beforehand, I'm sorry. Eleni, I know how to say Eleni. Eleni is from Ethiopia. She is a student still in Ethiopia, and she has the best email address, not only of the people here, but possibly of anyone I've ever seen. And I'm amazed that she got it. Her email address is elovepeace@yahoo.com. And I think that's pretty good. And that really says something about why she's here, I would say, too. She is a youth activist, and along with several of our panelists, recently spent time at a UN conference in Morocco, where a lot of these people met each other for the first time. So she's starting to really serve as a representative of her country outside of Ethiopia. And next, we have David Yewu, who is also Ghanaian, and although he's not currently in the government, he recently was the Deputy Minister for Communications and Technology in Ghana. So he's currently an activist, business person, and still sort of has one foot in the government, I think, a little bit. but he can correct that if that's wrong. We got a lot of time here. Lydia Muchodo is from Uganda, and she is one of two panelists who is involved in sport as a peace and tolerance building process in her country, and which really resonates with some of what we saw here yesterday in Cameron Sinclair's presentation, although more focusing here on peace rather than AIDS remediation, which is what Cameron was talking about in South Africa. And Clement Bwalya, who is from Zambia, also is involved in social change through sport. He is a project manager for a youth activists organization there. And Nema Ngana is from Tanzania. And Nema is one of a relatively small number of women worldwide who were collectively nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize this year for her work in peace and social justice. She co-founded an AIDS organization. She's currently serving an internship at the United Nations. So she's pretty impressive. And finally, Nsanjo Macha, who is Tanzanian also, and also a blogger who's currently living in the United States, also intends to go back to Africa. When he finishes his education, he's going to get his PhD next, he said. He's a lawyer, and like so many of these people, a human rights activist. So we really have an incredible group. It took a little while to introduce them, but you see what I mean. They're diverse, they're nationally diverse, and they're fairly wide range of age and interests, although they all converge on certain topics, as you will see. So let me just start by asking anybody, and if nobody jumps in, I'm going to force you. Tell us what you learned at PopTech. What happened here that you really were most excited about and learned the most from? Who wants to start?
Thank you. Coming to PopTech, I go to a lot of conferences and I speak in a lot of conferences. So when I got invited to PopTech, one of the things that excited me was it was an invitation to a meeting of people who were doing things. And I'm getting used to going to conferences that people are doing things. So I was expecting to come to a meeting where you had very serious talking, suit, tie, formal environment. But then when I came here, I realized that people were laid back, easygoing, but talking very serious stuff. So I found that very interesting about PopTech, and I think that's the great thing for me, that you came to an environment where we're talking very serious stuff, but in a very relaxed, easygoing environment with music, with humor, and all this stuff. So I found that very interesting about PopTech. The second thing for me is, coming from Africa, I'm involved in a lot of development work, literally traveling and living out of the suitcase in Africa. So, I come into a developed country and I find out that people are developing stuff. So I'm coming from a developing country to a developed country and people are still developing stuff. So it kind of lets me realize that I'm not doing anything extraordinary, but people are still doing stuff. So those are the two things that I found very interesting about PopTech and make me feel like coming here again and again.
What about things you learned at PopTech that really surprised you? Or you got the mic right in front of you. Why don't you answer that? Did you learn, what was the thing of the presentations or people you talked to in the hallways that most blew your mind or impressed you, excited you? And hold the mic up.
There are a number of things. I think for me, just the range of issues that were covered. I'm just fascinated by how innovative, and it's not just that the US has a monopoly on innovation, but there's a space that's created for innovation to take place, whether it's you're talking about Architects for Humanity or going to space and actually trying to figure out how I can do that as an individual. So the innovation prize, that was very impressive to me. I like the idea of using competition to bring about innovation. And I like Neil's idea of innovation for development because it's actually talking about what tools do people have and how can we encourage them to bring that out and not necessarily what can we give them and what can we bring to them, but it's more what can we bring out that people already have and they just don't have a chance to use it. And being in that environment where I'm witnessing people who are creative and innovative and making things happen, was mind-blowing to me.
Can I just...
Yeah, Nema,
I'll jump
please.
I just think that compared to other conferences, this one really supported people thinking outside of the box. And it's not just thinking outside of the box, but people don't even seem to see a box. And that, to me, really excited me. And although that I may not be able to apply the same knowledge and the science that people have been using, for example, to go up to space, but the fact that people are actually being allowed and encouraged to think, what if I did it some other way? So to me, that's the one thing that I'll take away and apply in my own life.
I think this conference has also been a great opportunity in terms of new ideas. I think Africa is lagging behind in terms of technology. But what really impressed me most was how technology can be used as a tool in terms of resource mobilization, especially with rural communities. I saw someone talking about how these communities were using the internet to market their own products and still remain in their own rural communities instead of going into urban areas. So that was really impressive in terms of how we can actually, encourage technology to come to Africa as also, as a way of mobilizing resources in advancements of Africa.
Indesandra, you had something.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned and appreciate is the fact that there are people in this world who are seriously concerned about building a better future. And that was very good. Banker, for example, his story about the Barefoot College, that was very motivating for me because I always think of my village, where I come from, what can I do? And we can see the people that we think are impoverished, are illiterate, that these people, given the proper conditions, if they're given tools and skills, they can do something. And I think that was one of the greatest lessons that I've learned from this conference.
Lydia.
My greatest lesson was about trying to see how the critical challenges in life are being addressed through technology. At one point I was thinking people are very innovative because they are looking at what can they contribute in the development processes, but they became more very, very practical for me when I was looking at the issues that we are still grappling with in Africa, especially like access to drinking water, where I think a lot of rainwater is just wasted away, and in preference for piped water, running water, which may be expensive even to maintain at some time. But also, I was also fascinated about the internet, especially the example from China, because I have a feeling, and I've always found that there isn't so much information that is very relevant in the African context on the net. But then here, China, they are connecting, even government is making a commitment to improve the connectivity, the access to internet for the rural poor. So I was very much more interested in finding how, with the networking that has resulted from this, can also be able to increase the relevancy of the internet to the African, to find more information that is really more relevant in the African context, like information on crops, on markets, because we have the greatest agricultural potential.
What did you hope to hear talked about here that you didn't hear?
Well, I would say that I heard most of what I think needed to be heard. I think what was most important for me is that this conference sort of reinforced my faith in the power of the individual to make a difference. That is so critical because when you engage other Africans, I'm Nigerian, other Nigerians, a lot of people almost sense that, well, what can I do as one person? And the initiatives that the multiplicity of speakers presented to us over the course of 3 days reinforces in me that an individual can really make a difference. And when you begin to sort of reignite that on a one-on-one basis, I believe you can have an effect that is almost limitless.
Did you sense that same thing, the opportunity that sort of maybe is there for individuals to feel empowered with some of the technologies and ideas that you heard here?
We are not on the same level in Africa. Things are different. What we see here and what happened in our country is not the same. Anyway, we learn a lot of here, and it's helped us to connect each other. And I want to say, for us, I think when I come back, I want to see in Africa maybe a kind of this conference. Try to make PopTech maybe not the same name we're going to take, but try to find a way to show African people a level of our technology. My English is not good. It's very great. It's very great what we see here, and I think really maybe in the future we can try to go ahead to come in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kadi. Coming from a country where English is not the language, you get special credit. But one concrete thing that was discussed here was the $100 PC. And I know that Nick Negroponte, who discussed that from the Media Lab and is moving forward with it faster than anybody would have expected, thinks that it's going to have a big role in Africa as well as other places. So, David, I want you to get the mic, because as a former minister in Ghana for this subject, I'm just curious how you feel about that. Did that seem something that's feasible to you? Did it excite you, or what?
I hope it works. But I think in practice, it will not be as smooth as he probably thinks it's going to be, Nick, if he's around. I've been in government, and I know, okay, I make the distinction between politicians who will say the right things and carry the baby, and what politicians won't do. No one should make the mistake. Politicians, well, very few, smart politicians don't lie. They're just very economical with the truth to give themselves some leeway to operate within, should you catch them somewhere else. But they actually will not tell a barefaced lie. And they'll make promises, and I've seen that happen. The question is the Nigerian government going to take 100 times 100,000 students and buy that number of laptops? Theoretically, they may have the money. In practice, you're going to get somebody screaming that, excuse me, what about the water in my constituency? So I think we need to see that within a context. I mean, big populations, but to knock out 10 million of those things in the first wave is probably a little bit optimistic.
Okay. Hand the mic to Eleni, your neighbor, because I want to hear from you too. Eleni.
When I came here, I was seeing people who are going to make a difference in this world. You know, in a lot of different conferences, you meet people, one or two, and it's exciting to see them. But here, everybody is extraordinary, and everybody it's their own topic, their own way of seeing the world, and their own way of doing things. And it was exciting. You know, I have learned a lot of things, even from my fellow Africans, from everybody. You know, I was here to learn, to see, to observe things, and I get what I want.
I think when we talk about technology and when we talk about Africa, a lot of what is being talked about is putting the cart before the horse. You know, I am as geeky as they can be. I love talking about anything from molecular nanotechnology right up to you name it. But on the other hand, I think we have to really look at the question of relevance. What is relevant to people's lives? Technology is just as much what Roy was discussing yesterday as far as the Barefoot College, as it is Wi-Fi system and mesh networks. What tends to happen is people see a glittering piece of equipment, and rather than look at whether it's relevant to the problem at hand, to sort of compare themselves to their neighbors, they acquire it. There has to be relevance, and if the need is there, it drives what the people want.
I'm a firm believer in it doesn't matter slavery or whatever it is. Africans need to fix Africa. Okay, we as Africans must take responsibility, first of all, for where we are, for where we came from, and we must be willing as a people to change Africa. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that Africans can change Africa, with or without the support of the West. Okay, I mean, that's a fundamental belief that I have. Because we have resources, we have human resources, we have natural resources, we have enough resources that if we utilize properly, we can develop Africa. The issue is how do we utilize the resources we have?
I think we need each other. I think Africa cannot develop on its own. I think we are living in a global village that is diverse. And with technology itself, I think we need each other in terms of marketing our resources, and technology can play a very greater role in terms of advancing Africa. But what we are seeing is certain unfair trade in terms of policies that have been implemented or are being implemented by certain foreign governments that are assisting Africa. So to say that we don't need aid and we need to develop Africa on our own, it would be a lie. But we need to have certain responsibility in terms of advancing our own ideas, but again, getting or sharing some of the certain experiences that we're learning from our colleagues.
It's about getting the opportunity for the people. It's about having a network. It's about meeting people. It's about bringing the people that we need to Africa.
It's a challenge for us. We come from Africa. It's up to us to make sure that we create the right conditions, institutional, governmental, so that these kind of technologies can have benefits for our communities.
Nema.
Okay, very brief comment. In terms of aid, what I'm seeing on the ground is that there's a paradigm shift happening in terms of international aid. For the past 50 plus years, aid has been monopolized by international organizations, international financial institutions, and others. What I'm seeing now is more of an empowerment from the people. You have young people, you have women, you have businesses, philanthropists, and others who are now taking a role in terms of aid and creating their own solutions to the challenges that are happening, especially in Africa. And I think that the space for their participation is increasing, but it needs to be even increased more.
When you look at what has been talked about here, from open source right down to what you could almost call fractal innovation in many different ways, you can see that it is possible to address some of the challenges that many people see as insurmountable. And this kind of conference and the kind of networks that I believe are going to be derivatives of this conference begin that process. People want the grand statement. They want someone to stand at a podium and say, well, we're going to solve all the problems in one fell swoop. But the efforts of the great people I have sitting at my side and people I've met in the audience and talked to in the aisles shows me that nothing, no matter how big a mountain, can't be climbed and broken down. So
Clearly, we could go on for hours more. It's amazing considering how much time we had, how much more there still is to say. But I certainly feel I leave here with a lot more optimism about Africa than I walked in the door with. And I think that this group really symbolizes to me a lot of amazing opportunity and possibility. And I'm really so thrilled that you could have them here, Andrew, and that Sun could help do that, make that possible, and that I could have the privilege of moderating this discussion. So thank you all so much. Hope we continue these discussions in a lot of ways in the future, online and elsewhere. So.
If I may say something on behalf of the group, I can only, and I know they probably support me in this, say a big thank you to, not just for the invitation, because I'm sure you can tell most people here are no wallflowers. They can stand on their own 2 feet. But for me, and I'm sure for my colleagues, it's the breadth of the subject area that was covered. Everybody, to a man, to a lady, says how insightful that was. And the key thing is the interest of the participants here, i.e. you guys, to interact with us, to seek to find out about what it is that we are here for, what it is about places where we come for, because like we've just seen, there is a stereotype which most of us don't subscribe to. So I'd like to say thank you very much for that, interest and for having us. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.